Hello, my name's Rob and welcome to SwiftSlots. And this video is brought to you by a bizarre series of coincidences from Mac and also from Pendle Slot Racing. Totally independent, but here we are making a video that I never intended to make. But that's the beauty of YouTube, I guess. So, a few months ago, I was put into contact with Mac, the same Mac that buys Rob Sale's lovely GT40s on his video. He's found a lot of them. And I ordered a GT40 from Mac and he went to a show and he found it for me and he sent it over. Lovely car. No point reviewing it because it's one of the same cars that Rob Sale's already done. But in that box, he gave me a free car. And that car is this black Texaco XR4i. Now, back in the day, 1988, I believe it was, I bought the Sierra Cosworth Scalextric set. And I wasn't overly blown away by the performance of the cars, but I had the car in 1988 and the nostalgic side of me wanted to buy this car again. I hadn't gotten round to buying it. I was probably going to look for it at Gaydon or something like that. But one turned up. Mac sent me one just randomly out the blue. And I thought, wow, what an amazing coincidence. I thanked Mac greatly and I thank you again on this video. But beautiful car, really happy with it and really, really pleased. And then a few weeks ago, Pendle Slot Racing said to me, here's a car. Maybe you can make this car go like hell, because they'd seen my Mini 1275 GT build and, you know, taking a standard car that anybody can upgrade and making it a lot better. He said, well, maybe you could do the same with this Sierra. And they sent me this Sierra here and a little pile of parts as well, upgrade parts. And Sean just said, crack on, see what you can do with it. So here we are. Never intended to make this video, but I've got myself a lovely Texaco XR4i like I used to have from my original set. And like I said, I was going to buy this one anyway. And then we've got this other Sierra, literally a couple of weeks later, that's going to have the full 9 yards to it, almost the full 9 yards. We're going to see how fast we can get this car around Crow Valley. But obviously, we need to start with the car. Now, this car from Scalextric, this car from Pendle Slot Racing is a little bit challenged in as much as it has no axle, no bearings, no wheels, no tyres, no nothing really. So they're all in a little bag that I'll show you in a minute. But what we do have is Mac's car. Now Mac's car is a beautiful car. It's complete, it runs, it's extremely nice and runs really well and is a good example of this car. So let's go to Crow Valley, let's run this car around the track and see what my standard Sierra goes like, and then we'll get on the table. I'll show you what parts that Pendle Slot Racing have sent me for this car and a couple of extras of my own, and then we'll get to the workbench. We'll build this car fully up to a level that anybody can build, and that's the point of this video, to make this car buildable for anybody just by buying standard parts, no clever sort of engineering, just a straight up build using hot up parts. And then we'll take this car to the Crow Valley and we'll see if we've managed to improve it at all. So let's get to Crow Valley, let's run my nice Texaco XR4i around and see what we're starting with. Okay, so we have a time set by the completely standard Scalextric XR4i from the 90s, and that time is a 67 something. Now, to be honest with you, this car handled actually really rather well. I was quite surprised at how well it did actually handle on an MDF track, but it does have a few problems. namely this excessive movement in the front wheels. So that is not helpful on a slot car, and it's basically not supporting the front end. So every time you exit a corner, you get this, a little bang on the back wheel. So that's telling me that as the car is going into a corner, the front end is not being supported by that tyre, so it's lifting the back end up, and then as you exit the corner, it's banging back down again. So it's reassuring to know that you're giving the car absolutely everything, because you get that little tapping out the bend, but it's not very good because you know that you're losing a lot of performance with the car being unsupported. And if that wheel was supporting the car a little bit better, it would keep the tyres on the ground and you get more traction, and then you get the car to go faster. So that needs to be addressed. Also typical for this age of car, it's got very heavy glass with a very heavy interior, and with the car so long and so narrow and so tall, all that weight in the top of the car is really not doing us any favours at all. So we need to sort that out as well. And we're going to sort that out with the donated Pendle Slot XR4i. So let's take you through all the parts that Pendle Slot have delivered to me to try and get this car to go a little bit better than stock. Actually, just before I show you what parts we've got to make this car go a little bit better, the keen-eyed amongst you may see that this car is actually a Palmer Tube Mills car. Now, that is actually an Australian car. So in the UK, this car is quite rare because the cars that we have in the UK are actually called Fletcher Steel, not Palmer Tube Mills. So this is actually an Aussie car, all the way from the other side of the world, which is quite cool. So with that said, let's look at the parts we've got. Okay, so first up we got these beautiful Pendle Slot 15-inch alloy wheels, and they're 13.8 by 8.5mm, and they're part number PCS 32151308. And they're held on with a single stainless steel grub screw on a standard 332 axle. Now these are going to be a big improvement on the standard Scalextric wheels because A, the standard Scalextric wheels tends to want to fall off the axle, and B, they're not known for being the roundest. So these are going to improve things greatly because all the time the tyre is in contact with the ground, you're going forwards. But if they're a bit of a wobble and the car's jumping around, the car is not making contact with the ground and you don't get as much traction. So a nice round wheel is essential for going fast. Now, not the most exciting of parts, but they're extremely essential, a pair of axles. Now these are actually hardened steel, they're very round and very, very high quality. So they are going to keep everything running very, very smoothly. And because this car doesn't have any bearings either, we've got a pair of nylon bearings. So they should do the job perfectly well for what we want to do. And for the rear gear, we have this very high quality slotted 27 tooth standard offset crown gear in brass, and it's part number SIG127BZ, and that will keep everything running very smoothly. Now Pendle Slot have given me some tyres for this car, and it pains me slightly to use them because these are really, really good. And the why it pains me is because I'm going to have to use these F22s on the front because I don't have anything worse. I know that sounds a bit strange, but the F22 tyres that Pendle Slot do are really, really good rubber, and it seems a waste to use them on the front, but I don't have anything decent to use on the front anyway, or worse should I say. So these are part number RT03 F22, and these are really, really good tyres. So on the rear we've got the RT03 F15s. Now these are 15 Shore tyres. Now I actually race my rally cars on these 15 Shore tyres, and they are really, really good. So we're going to put the 15s on the rear, and unfortunately the 22s on the front, although the 22 is an excellent tyre for the rear of the car as well. But I don't have anything worse to put on the front that's not all crumbly and a mess. So we'll have to put the F22s on the front, but it is a little bit sacrilege. But anyway, those are the tyres. And then to go in the wheels, we've got these really nice 3D printed lattice wheels, and they are very similar to the wheels that are on the standard car. They're not entirely the same, but they're very similar. And we got a set of wheel spacers as well. The wheel spacer goes behind the insert, and it just ensures that the insert goes into the wheel nice and square. So they're really, really nice. They're very high quality 3D printed and will absolutely look the part once we sprayed them up gold to match what was already on the car. And the part number for the wheel inserts is PCS INS12T. Now these are all the parts that Pendle Slot have given me for this car, but I've also bought a few extra trinkets for this car myself as well, so I'll take you through those. So the first of the parts that I bought for this project myself is actually a new motor, because the motor in this car doesn't run. And this is a 20,000 RPM motor. Now I would have been happy with a standard 18,000, but I don't have any of those in stock myself personally. I do have these 20,000 RPM Pendle Slot motors though, and they are absolutely fine for the job. I've used them before and they run really, really well. And this is AC6, and as you can see, it's a double-ended shaft. I don't need that length, so I'll probably just chop off the excess. But these are excellent motors and they're 20,000 RPM, and they're noticeably better than a standard Scalextric car. So this will give this car a little bit of extra pep. And because I don't want to fit a nylon gear to this motor, I've actually bought myself a pair of steel pinion gears, and they are 9-tooth. Now this is AS003. So I usually use brass, but it's not necessary for this project. I found these steel gears to run really, really nice, and they're made by Allslot. And you know one of my builds wouldn't be complete without a standard Slotting Plus guide, so one of those is going to go in as well. And because I really can't stand my cars with missing wing mirrors, that's one massive bugbear of mine. I think the car loses so much character when it's lost its wing mirrors, it's ridiculous. So I bought myself these nice Type 1 rear view mirrors, which are the correct mirrors for the Sierra, in red, so that will complete the look of the car on the outside. And as I said, this is actually called a Type 1, and they come in all different colours. This particular one is red because the car is red. Okay, so I've got a couple of tuning parts for this car that I've made myself. So the first one is this tube. Not very exciting, I know, but this is going to transform the front of this car. And this particular tube I will be selling on my website, pre-cut, ready to go, along with some other parts, which I will show you now. But I'll just need to clear the table off just to show you, because there's rather a lot of them. Okay, so the first one is a vacuum formed glass. Now these are a perfect fit in the Sierra, and they're completely ready to trim and fit to your car, and that is going to lose a huge amount of weight from the top of the car. Now obviously you're going to want an interior as well. If you've got a nice lightweight glass, you may as well have a nice lightweight interior. And I've gone a little bit mad here. I think, to be honest, I've probably gone a bit too mad, because I've made quite a lot of different variants, and there's actually a fifth variant that I haven't got here right now, but it will be available when this video goes up. So the first one I've got is this rally interior, or what I'm calling a rally interior. And as you can see, I've put a fuel tank or some sort of tank in the back window just for interest, a bit of visual interest to make it more rally car. It's got a spare wheel in the back, and obviously we've got a co-driver and the driver himself. So that is the rally interior. So next up, we've got a twin racing driver, which is basically an exact copy of the original interior with a simple navigator. I'm not quite sure why you'd have it, whatever. So it's a navigator and a driver in standard format. And then we have a single racing driver, which is, to be honest with you, I think where the money is, or the sweet spot, so to speak. Because I think a racing car would have one driver, and this particular Sierra is a racing car. So I think this is really the right interior for this car, with no seat and just one single racing driver. And then also, to satisfy a civilian market or non-racing market, I've done this interior here. Again, single driver, but with a seat, but no head. And that is because you can buy a head or put your own 3D printed head on. You can buy the heads from Pendle Slot Racing as well. They do a whole range of civilian 1/32 scale heads. So you can have just an ordinary guy driving your ordinary Sierra if you want. And like I say, I've actually got another one of these interiors, exactly the same as this, but with a passenger. So you can actually have two civilians, a driver and a passenger if you want. Now all these inserts and the windscreens are all available on my website. They're £6 a pair, and if you want to buy the tube as well, I'm adding 50p to the order. So if you wanted a glass, an interior and a tube, it will cost you £6.50 plus the post, and the link for those is just here. So these are all the parts we're going to use in this build, and like I say, some of them were donated and some of them I've made myself. Now all of these parts are available to buy either through my website or through Pendle Slot Racing, so anybody can do the work that I'm just about to do now, and you can release the inner race car that is lurking inside this rather nice XR4i. So let's get to the bench and turn this car into the racing car it always wanted to be. Okay, so let's start this job off with doing all the painting work to get that out the way with. So with the interior, I'm going to rub it down with a piece of Scotch-Brite pad to key it all up, and then prime it in this Citadel Gracia plastic primer. It's nothing special, it's just plastic primer. Then I shall put a base colour down of varying mister colours, probably silver on the interior with the black seats, and then I shall paint up the driver figure with a selection of the Warhammer colours, just the ordinary paint colours. So that will take care of the interior. And I think with the wheels we're going to do something slightly different. So I'm going to prime it in this white Mr. Colour 1000 white primer, and then I'm going to put some Tamiya panel liner into all the detail. Then I'm going to brush over the top of it with my airbrush with this number 9 gold from Mr. Colour. And what I'm hoping to achieve is a nice pre-tinted black all the way down in the bottom of those lattice spokes without actually having to go in there with the actual dye itself. Because when you go in there with this dye and you get it actually on the colour, you can discolour the colour. And I want to try and keep the colour bright whilst having the depths of the spokes dark. So prime it, ink it, and then gold over the top, and then possibly you might have to touch it in and then just dust over the top. But what happens with airbrushing, you tend not to be able to get paint down into these real tight nooks and crannies, and I'm counting on that because I want the black in there. And this gold, although it's very, very strong, if you come at it from an angle and all these little pockets in the lattices, hopefully the spray will just dust over the top, catch on the top of the lattice and leave the hole nice and black. But we'll see. Never done it before, we'll see. Right, let's get to the spray booth and get these bits painted up. Okay, so that's all the paintwork out the way with to start this job off, and as you can see I've used black on the dashboard and rear seat, silver on the main base, and varying blues on the driver himself. Not the greatest job in the world, but perfectly good enough for what we're dealing with here. And the wheel inserts, well, they were a little bit of a revelation. I didn't actually realise that the bottoms of these lattice are actually hollow. So when I put my ink in, it soaked all the way through the wheel and came out on the bottom, which is fine because what's that happened now is the sides of those lattice spokes have actually been stained in black, which gives me exactly the same effect as I was after anyway. So we kind of got to the same place I wanted to be, albeit a slightly different path. Okay, so as you've seen, I've stripped all the chassis completely down, and what I've also done is remove these little plastic mouldings here and also the upright hook that used to hold in the PCB, because I don't want that. I'm putting lead in here. And I've also drilled a hole in the bottom of this magnet hole socket here so that I could primarily push out the magnet from the top side here and push it out. But also I can use that as like a glue rivet. So if you put glue on the inside and put your lead in, let the glue squeeze up through this hole, the glue will actually come up through that hole and form like a rivet and hold the lead in really, really well. So obviously all we need to do really to rebuild this car is simply pop in the rear bearings. It's all very, very easy stuff. Drop in our gear, pop in the back axle, and that is basically the back end completely finished in essence. There. So what we're going to need to do now is cut this motor shaft down. Now I've already checked the length of the shaft on here and it's absolutely the right length. So we just need to chop this excess shaft off. Now there's a little trick that I like to do, and that involves my Dremel and a 9-volt battery. going to go something like that. So basically put your 9-volt battery on the motor and then spin up the motor and cut it while it's spinning with your Dremel rotary tool, and that will give you a really nice finish on the end of your motor shaft, and it looks like that. It's really, really easy. So the next job to do is simply put on our pinion. Okay, so after some messing about getting the motor pinion in exactly the right place, I've run into a slight problem which I hadn't accounted for, but it's an easy fix to get out of it. Now, if you can see, the motor shaft isn't engaging in that gear particularly well. Now, this motor shaft was exactly the same length as the original Scalextric motor that came out. So either that gear was different on the Scalextric motor or the shaft was too short in the first place. So you've got a couple of different fixes here that we can do to sort this problem out. One is to do what I like to do, pull the motor apart, put the armature and the shaft in the lathe and push the shaft all the way forwards. As you can see, I've left enough motor on there to kind of shaft to kind of do that, to make up that gap. But that's not something that everybody can do or would want to do. So we're left with a couple of other options. So one option is to fill a load of spacers in this gap here so that it stops the pinion from going that way, so therefore doesn't rely on this shoulder here for the motor. The other slightly easier way of doing it is to fit what they call axle stoppers. And these are axle stoppers, and they're just basically spacers with the grub screw in. So if I take one out, I'll show you how they work. So, oh, there was one grub screw there, just shot off, stuck to the motor. So pop, right, okay, so that's the wrong grub screw. Okay, so we'll use this Allen key for now then. So if you pop the grub screw into the axle stopper, thus, and then put the axle stopper on the side of the gear itself on the axle, pop the bearing back on, and you can put the whole assembly back in like that. Now you've got really nice gear mesh again. So all we need to do is find the grub screw, bring the axle stopper up to the bearing and just nip. Actually, that axle isn't actually in the right places. So let's get the axle sorted out first. Get the axle in exactly the right place. There, so we just nip up the gear and then axle stopper up to the bearing. Make sure the gear is not hard against the pinion, but close enough. Then just nip it up and then just try the mesh. Now actually that's really, really smooth. And there we are, that is it. That has actually fixed the problem completely. So this axle stopper can't actually allow the gear to go any further that way, so therefore keeping the mesh. And that means now that the motor is not engaging on this surface here. So it doesn't actually matter how long that shaft is because it's all controlled by that inner axle stopper there. And what I'm going to do now is pop a spot of glue into those bearings because I don't want them rotating in the body, and that will fix the back end completely done. Okay, so next we're just going to pop on these tyres onto these wheels and then get these wheels mounted to the chassis. And then just for fun, we'll set the rear width of the wheels. There we are. So just set the wheels now so they're basically flush with the outer part of that sill, and that's our wheelbase set on the rear end of the car. They stick out a little bit on the backs, but that's just a quirk of the car because it tapers, but they're all nice and flush at the front. So with our back wheels all sorted out and the entire drivetrain at the back completely done, we can now turn our attentions to the front end, and that's where all the tuning is going to come from. So far with the back end, it's all upgraded with nice new bearings, lovely axle and gears and so on and so forth, 20,000 motor, that's all great. But that's not really where our main performance is going to come from. That's just going to make the car run smooth. The main performance is coming from the solid front axle. Okay, so this next step involves using the brass tube that I supply in my kit for an extra 50 pence. Now to go with this brass tube, you're also going to want two 1mm thick spacers. Now you can just go and buy these in a slot car shop as 1mm spacers. That will be 40 thou. So you can either buy them at that or you can make your own. And I can show you how to make your own very, very easily. And all you do is get yourself a piece of 1mm thick plastic card and you drill two 2.5mm holes in it. Then you get yourself a pair of side cutters and you cut them out into rough squares. Then with your side cutters again, make them vaguely square and then knock the corners off. Just like that. Then once you've got that, get yourself an M2.5mm bolt and two washers. Now they don't have to be 2.5mm washers, they can be 3mm washers. Pop a washer on the bolt and then put your cut out pieces of plastic card onto the bolt all the way through. With another washer on the other side and then an M2.5mm nut, and do the whole lot up reasonably tight. Just like that. So now we've got our pieces of plastic card squashed in the nut. Then, with your electric drill, put the nut in the actual jaws of your, well, actually you don't have to put the nut, you can put the thread. Let's make life easy. Let's put the thread in there. So it's like that. And then we're going to turn our drill into a lathe, like this. And voila, we have two round spacers. Well, that one isn't quite round because I didn't actually file it off enough. But you get the idea. I've created two round 1mm spacers from plastic card. And I've essentially now got a pair of these ones, the ones I did earlier. I'll come back to these and I'll round these up again. So now we've actually created, or you've purchased two 1mm spacers. We can now move on to getting the front of the car sorted out.
Mum, he's using his clothes as rags again.
Okay, so what we're going to start by doing is scratching up the inside of this pocket where the old holder used to be that holds that front wheel assembly. So I'm going to give that a real good scratching up. Doesn't hurt to do it on the side as well. Give it a really nice scratch on the side as well. Get it all keyed up, nice and rough. So once you're happy that it's all roughed up enough, you now need to put the tyres on your wheels. Like that. Now what you want to do is put your axle onto your wheels and basically assemble up the front end using those spacers. So we have one wheel on there, and then pop on a 1mm spacer, and then put your tube on, and then put another 1mm spacer on, and then put your wheel on. But don't go too mad with the wheel, just for a second. You can just nip it up if you want to, just to hold it on the axle so it doesn't all fall apart. Then what you want to do is put the whole assembly into the front of the car like that, spacing that tube between those bulkheads, and then move up the wheel so it just snags the inside of the chassis like that. So it's not free to move, but it's not tight, but it's free to move. So you've got a little bit of movement there. And that basically almost looks like the front end done to all intents and purposes. So what we now have to do is we have to mix up some car body filler. So what I do is mix up the filler and squidge it all in there, not too much. And then we want to be dropping the axle into the car body filler, making sure that that brass tube there drops back between those bulkheads like that there. And that will then push the car body filler up the sides of that tube. And if you get the chance, you can drag a little bit over the top as well. Then what we're going to do is mount the body onto the chassis and then lower the chassis onto the setup plate like this. And then set up the front axle height by putting a packer underneath the front of the car to lift the front of the car up so that we actually get the exact correct amount of wheel spacing. Then we're going to leave it for as long as it takes the car body filler to go off. And at the end of the job, what we should end up with is a front axle tube that is completely locked into place because of the car body filler having bonded it in. Then afterwards, you could either put a bit of super glue over it if you wanted to, or a little bit of extra car body filler just to neaten it up and to get it to completely embed that front axle tube. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to mix up some filler. We're going to get this front end all set up so that we can move on to the next stage, which will be fitting the guide. Okay, so it's been about an hour now, and that filler should be well and truly dry. And if you saw, I ended up putting a 1.4mm drill underneath the front end, and that got my front looking really, really nice. So there is what I've ended up with on the front of both sides. And if you notice, I put a little bit of tape underneath this car because I didn't want the filler squeezing out through that hole and ending up all over my setup plate and so on. So if we whip off the body now, we've now got the front axle completely in place. So what I'm going to do now is just scratch up the top of this brass tube and this little bit of filler here, and put a fresh little bit of filler over the top just to sort of lock the whole thing into place, and then we can paint it and call it done on the front axle. So when you've finished fitting your front axle tube and you've painted it all up, it should end up looking just like that. And as you can see, it runs very, very smoothly indeed, with no problems at all. So that is our front end completely sorted out. So the next job was going to be the guide, but I've had a second thought because I want to try and induce some body float into this chassis. And when I fit this chassis back into the body, it fits very, very nicely as you would expect it to, but it is quite tight all the way around the edge, and I do want a little bit of compliance. Although the front end of the body has got that tongue, it does still have a decent amount of movement in that tongue. So I can actually get something akin to body float. Although it doesn't have a front post, I think we can do it. So before I put the guide in, I'm going to take all this running gear back out, and they've got a mold line here, or an upright, I guess. And I'm going to try and take away half of it all the way around the chassis. But on the front, I have to see how it goes. I might be able to take away a little bit of the vertical. I don't really want to take away too much more. I don't really want to take away any strength off the front of the body because I don't really want to lighten this body particularly. That's out the scope of this video. But if I can take away half of this plastic ridge all the way around with a simple file and a Dremel, I'm hoping that that will give me just about enough clearance to get a little bit of body float in there. We'll have to see. Might be able to just trim away a little bit on the chassis here, just maybe clean it up, maybe clean it up, not sure. Let's take away a little bit of plastic and then we'll see how we are at that point. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I can report to you that that was incredibly successful. I've taken off about 2/3 of the plastic around the edge, so left about 1/3 of the little rib on the chassis all the way around. And I've been paying very careful attention to take off the corners as well, so it's quite easy to leave those corners sticking out. And I've managed to take away a little bit here and here. I haven't touched anything around the lip, so everything I can get to, I've taken away. I've been careful to trim around the exhaust pipe as well to try and keep the exhaust in place. But watch this. This is amazing. So that goes in there. It just drops in, look. Just straight in, no problem. And look, all that nice pod float, and that will just drop straight into the body. No problems at all. It sits home perfectly. You've got about, I don't know, maybe 0.5 millimeter of movement forwards and backwards, about 0.5 millimeter sideways, and I could definitely feel the sideways flex, and the chassis is free to jump around vertically as well. So that is absolutely job done, and that will go a long way to helping the performance of this car with just a little bit of body float to separate the chassis from the body. That was incredibly successful. Right, now we can put all the running gear back in and we can put the guide in. Okay, so I've gone ahead and I've actually wired up my Slotting Plus guide. It's very boring and I've done it millions of times on this channel, so I've just skipped it and built it now. But I would like to point out a couple of notes. So first of all, the wire I'm using is 26 gauge silicon wire. You could buy it from eBay. It's very, very cheap, very plentiful. And the braids I'm actually using is 0.2 racing braid. I don't like to use the slightly thicker stuff because I find it can influence the front end a little bit, but the 0.2 is very, very good. You can get it tinned and untinned. This is the NSR stuff. It's, was it? No, I think this is Pendle Slot actually. It's untinned obviously, but I know NSR do tinned stuff. I don't know the difference. They both seem to work well. But one point I would like to say, these pliers, and I bought these from Staffs via Pendle Slot, and they're for cutting things like braid and wire and whatnot. And if you just want to trim the end of the wire, it does a beautiful job. Look at that. They really are very good, very precision cutters. I've been looking for a pair of cutters that I could just nip the end of my wires with and so on, because I've been using scissors and everything else and they're not very precise. But these are really, really good, guys. So if you fancy a pair of cutters to cut your wire or to cut the braids, really, really neat. When they're underneath the car and you need to just sort of trim the braids to get them nice and even, these are great. These work really well. So little side note there. Anyway, the point is I needed to set this guide up because I wanted to see how far off I was. So the long and the short of it is, with 0.2 braid, with my axle set where mine is, now obviously if your axle is set slightly differently, you're going to get a slightly different result. But I've set mine for about a 0.5 mil clearance on the wheel arch like I showed you. And I say Slotting Plus guide with 0.2 braid, and the braid is quite well flatted down. So my guide is in there now nicely. Put it on the setup block, and if I push it down to make sure everything is nice and flat, and then move the back end, so it's not going to do it now, is it? But hang on, that wire's touching the wire there, so let's push it down. So there we are. See, you can see the front tires are just about catching, and they're actually moving as they should. So obviously there's virtually nothing on there, but that's the point. There is virtually nothing on the front of that axle. So by the time I've trued those tires down, there's going to be nothing, and these tires are going to be free spinning. Although that said, the body isn't on and there's a little bit of weight got to go in this car yet, so maybe I might just leave it. Anyway, my point is, to adjust this guide, I don't need to put a packer in it with this setup. I just need to file down this excess of plastic. So I'm not actually going to show you that in this video because I'm just going to do it, but I'm going to tell you about it now. So when I get all the weight in this car and I've trued the front tires, if I find that the front tires are hovering a little bit, obviously I've got nowhere other to go than to take away that little bit of plastic, which is absolutely no problems whatsoever. Just get a file and just gently file the top of that bar and keep checking the guide until the front tires touch the setup plate, but there's no actual resistance on them at all. So we're going to come back to that, or I'll come back to that off camera when I need to, but just know that's what I should be doing in the future. Apart from that, this guide is a really good fit. Now obviously some of you may know that I actually sell my reaming tool, and that is for precision fit work for a Slotting Plus guide, but I don't think I want to go that far in this video. And putting the Slotting Plus guide into this chassis just as it is, as you can see there, yeah, there's some movement in there. Is it excessive? I don't know, whatever. But I'm not going to ream it. But so just to say that you can actually get away with simply putting a Slotting Plus guide straight into this car, and it'll work absolutely perfectly. Now I'm just struggling with this screw because I want to try and screw it in to conclude this job, and obviously I can't do it on camera. So there we are. So if we just screw it in, bring it home, and there we are. So that's the guide actually fitted, and like I say, it almost works as it is. It's just, you can see there, it's actually working, but by the time these are skimmed, don't know, bit of weight in there, might bring it back. Anyway, so that's the braid, that's the cutters, that's the guide. That's pretty much all we need to do. So the next job now, I think, is probably to cut some lead. So let's cut some lead. Okay, so in order to fit weight in your car, you need to know what you're dealing with first. You can't just throw weight in it and hope it sticks. Now, all my rally cars are between 90 and 95 grams, and they're all 60 mil wide. So this car is 56 mil wide, so it's close. It's not super narrow. So I think we'll be able to get away with a rally spec for this car, certainly on Crow Valley. So we need to know what everything weighs without lead, so that we know how much lead to put on this car, so we've got a target weight. So really, we need to build the body. So this is a great time to do it. So before we put everything in the body, let's see what everything weighs. So the original glass and interior weighs basically 15.25 grams in the original. And then my lightweight interior weighs 2.8 grams. So that is basically 12 grams lighter. So that's 12 grams of weight out the roof of this car. So what I like to do normally is cut a hole in the roof of the glass panel, and then I fit a piece of silver foil tape to the inside like that, and then I bond it into the roof. Once it's in the car, I then use these strips of foil tape just to run down the sides as well, just to keep the sides all in place. So let's do that now, and then we can come back and take it from there. So that's how I fit the glass in. I use silver foil tape on the roof, having cut out a square in the roof and a nice bit of overlap. And I use a little piece on the side, a little piece on that side as well. And then the interior has got a little notch in it, roughly level with the back of the parcel shelf. And there's a notch in the front, right on the very edge of those serrations. And this simply slides into the back of the chassis like that. And then you can just clip it in the front like that. And that will give you a perfectly fitting interior. So that's the interior and glass all fitted in perfectly. All we now need to do is fit the wing mirrors. And again, I'm going to use my lovely little pliers or cutters that I've got from Staffs. I'm going to nip those off. I shall glue those into the car. Actually, for the purposes of this video, at this particular point, I'm just going to push them in because they're a nice tight fit, so no point gluing them in. So there we are. So that is the body now, completely ready to go. So you just need to take a weight for that. And the weight is 21.6 grams. Now there's a fair bit of weight in this actual body, but I say that trimming that down is beyond the scope of this particular video. But as you've seen from previous videos, you can lose about 1/3 of the weight out of these bodies with a bit of Dremel work. So I've done that in other videos. I'm not going to do it in this video, but I will do it in another video at some point. So if you haven't seen me do it and you don't want to go back in any videos, then you'll see me do it in a different one. So that's okay. So that's what we've got for that. Now we also need to put these inserts into these wheels because we need to load up the chassis with as much weight as we're actually going to have, so that we actually know how much lead we need to fit in the car, more or less. So I'm just going to take these wheel inserts off now, and I'm going to insert them into the alloy wheels. So I think it's worth stopping here for a moment just for two things. One, to admire how nice these wheel inserts are. I don't know if that's showing, but all these lattice are completely see-through. On the back of them there you can see all the little spokes. They really are very, very, very nice. So the way that these inserts work is you push them onto the wheel center in the middle, and they're a nice tight fit. So you push them all the way home, and then you can get a little bit of super glue on a cocktail stick, and then just dot the super glue on the insert in there, and then just simply drop the insert into the wheel itself, and that works really, really well. So there we are. Just put a little bit of glue on there. Simply take an insert, pop the insert in and push it in, and that is it. The insert is in. Really, really nice fit. I'm not saying that because these were given to me for this build. They genuinely are very, very nice, and these inserts work really, really well. I mean, they're brilliant. Right, anyway, so let's get these other 4 done and then we can move on. Okay, so we're really, really close now to the final running weight of this car, unweighted. Now, there are lights to go in this car, but we'll sort that out in a minute. So as you can see, everything is in there, more or less, that will be on the car when it's actually finished. So we now need to know how much weight we're dealing with the car in this condition. So what have we got now? Everything is pretty much on board. We've got 75 grams basically. So really we want to get this car up to about 95 grams. So we've got 20 grams or 15 to 20 grams of weight to play with, which is plenty, I think, to get this car to perform really, really nicely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fit some lead down the sides, a little bit in the front, and we'll see where we are with that. And we'll try and get this car up to about 90 grams. Then I can put the lights in and then we can get the car genuinely finished, see what she's like on the track, and then I've got 5 grams of weight to play with if we need it. So I'll obviously put a piece of weight in there as well, so we'll factor that into the 90 grams. So let's cut some weight, let's get this car up to 90 grams as she sits now, then we can do the lights and then she'll be done. And obviously, for those of you that don't know, I also sell 2mm lead as well. Okay, so that's all the weight fitted in the chassis, and I ended up putting a little bit of weight on either side here and 2 pieces of lead where the old magnet was, because it just happens to work and I could actually get approximately 6 grams of weight in there. So that's really, really helpful. That's really good weight, really low down, right at the back of the car where we need it. And a little bit of weight slightly forward just to give it a little bit of front end bias. So the all important thing is now, what weight are we at now? We're almost completely done. So we are at just under 92 grams, which is absolutely perfect. That gives me roughly 3 grams in hand to play with, but bearing in mind there's a light kit that's just about to go in this car now. I don't think the light kit's going to add that much, but it might just lift it up. Now, it does pain me slightly to put a light kit in this car because I want to try and make it as light as possible and give it some really good performance. But I do think lights add something to this car, and I'm not really trying to break any speed records with it. I just want to vastly improve its performance and also make it look nice as well. So I think the lights, although may compromise the handling in terms of weight, I think they'll be worth it because they'll look really cool. Okay, so the lights are now in the car and it was all very, very successful, and I'll talk you through what I've done. So nothing's really changed with the body other than I've put a little bit of foil tape to stop the light bleed through the body, just something that I like to do. But a lot has changed on the chassis. As you can see, we've got a full lighting kit in there. Now, I wanted to keep this light bar in the front because it needs to be there for the lighting of the headlights. That was 1.8 grams as it was originally, but the keen-eyed amongst you might notice that I've slimmed it down dramatically on the inside here to try and lose some of that weight. So I brought it down to 1.2 grams only. So that has lost quite a bit of weight in itself, but it did need to be there. But I've also trimmed out all the plastic on the front here to lose a bit more weight as well. So this doesn't actually add too much weight. Now, all of this lighting kit that was in the car, that weighs about, well, that weighs 5.5 grams total. And my actual LEDs that I've used here only weigh about 1 gram. So by the time I've trimmed this down and used it in the build and added my own lights, this whole lighting kit has only added about 1 gram of weight, because the target weight of this chassis with the whole light bar before I fitted the lights in it was 71.6 grams. So that's what I had before I fitted all my lighting kit. So now what I've got is 72.48 grams. So that is literally only added on 0.9 of a gram for the whole lighting kit, including the original light bar on the front, which I did kind of need, which I've covered in foil tape. I've also added in a little foam light blocker behind there because there's not much you can do with the light coming out the back of the LED, bearing in mind that this is kind of semi-removable. So I put a bit of foam there as well. So that's kind of what's going on with the inside of the car. So on the back of the LEDs, what I've done is I've actually glued on some black heat shrink tubing, and I've filled up the back of the LED with a bit of gloss black paint so you don't get too much light bleed coming back. So that's that. And the lighting that I use, the LEDs, these are parts from eBay UK. So I don't know about America, but these are the parts that I use in the UK. So they're from a company called Bright Components, and you can see the part number there of the red LEDs. And then the what I call blue LEDs, but they're bluey white. I mean, trying to find a properly white LED, they do exist, but these have got a bit of a blue tinge to them. Not too bad, but they have got a bit of a blue tinge. And you can see there the part number for those. And then my headlights that I have used now, which are sort of white, but they've got a bit of a yellow hue to them. They're literally those ones there. You can see the part number there. And these are what I've used in this car as well, but only one of them. And then the resistors that I use are these components here. As you can see, they come in a nice little pack. And they also come with a nice little instruction manual for them as well, for those that keep on forgetting how to wire up the resistors. The little instruction pack is there. And this seller is really, really helpful. And he does a really nice job of sorting you out and making sure you get what you need. If you just send him an email, he'll certainly sort you out. And that's what I've used here. So I used 2 resistors down there for the 2 LEDs there, 1 resistor inside that sleeve in there for the front light there. Also on the back of the car, where this original light bar was, there was actually some posts. So I've chopped all those posts out because that again is unwanted weight. And by not using the original Scalextric light bar, I don't actually have the weight of this piece of fiberboard either. So I just used the legs and glued them down to the actual chassis to keep the weight all the way down. So like I say, when I finished, I've only ended up with 0.9 of a gram more with the lights as without the lights. So the rear end is going to be held in by this NSR body float screw in brass, and they're just ordinary NSR body float screws. And I've managed to retain all the body float even with this light bar in by drilling out these holes to 3.1 mil, and that gives me a nice slack fit on those bulbs, so that doesn't those diffusers, so that doesn't actually hold back any of the body float whatsoever. And also, just to ease things up a little bit more, I've trimmed a little bit of plastic off the top here and also thinned out the plastic across the bottom here, because where I'd filed the corners I'd left a little kind of shelf, if you like, I suppose, but I've gone with a chisel and I've taken away that shelf and I've scraped it back. So I've now got a consistent line running all the way through, which has allowed the chassis to poke forwards another sort of 1/4 of a millimetre. And then just to help the body float as well, I've gone on the inside of this slot here and I've just opened up the back of the slot, top and bottom. I've not cut the front of it. I've just kind of dovetailed it almost from the back, just to open it up at the back so that we actually retain a nice little bit of body float in that tongue as well. So now you can actually see, hopefully there you'll see, I've got a really nice body float there. It's not up and down, it's only side to side, which is exactly what you want. So even with the lighting kit in the car now, with it all being nice and loose, I got really good body float that's not compromised, and that should really help the performance of the car. So if I just pop this back together again, I can show you the whole thing. So you've got to put these lights in a little bit loose so that you can guide the headlights in first. There we are. There, right. So as you can see now, you've got some really nice body float there that's not being hindered at all by those headlights or that tongue in the front. And it's absolutely spot on. And with that NSR body float screw in the back, it's all very, very free, and that's absolutely perfect. I got really high hopes that this chassis will perform nicely now. There you go. She's a sub 50-second car. Honestly, I never saw that coming. I didn't actually know what to expect from this car right from the start of this video. A 67 something from the standard car. Well, okay, I didn't expect that. Didn't know what to expect. And I certainly didn't expect a sub 50-second from this car. Now, I got to admit, it didn't come straight away. In the guise that you last saw when I was building this car on screen, she actually got a consistent 51.5 over and over and over again. No matter how hard I pushed her, she was 51.5 consistently. And she was just letting go on the back end a little bit. The back end was just a little tiny bit loose. So I put an extra 6 grams of weight right at the back of the chassis, right alongside the motor, and I pushed the lead down inside the piece of the chassis that holds the back axle where it dips down. Just 2 lumps of 3 grams either side, and that lifted the weight up to 101 grams, which is a little bit heavier than I normally run a car. But I haven't lightened the body because that wasn't the subject of this video. So the body is still full weight, albeit with the Lexan parts. So that would have removed about 6 to 7 grams, which I would have then put down on the chassis as lead. And I think in that, guys, we probably might have got it over the 50 or sub 50-second mark in that way. But because I haven't lightened the body, I had to compensate a different way. But you've got to be careful when you add lead, not to add too much, because it will work against you. It gets to a point where it says enough is enough and it starts to go the other way. So 101 grams is right on the edge of where I would run the car, but it really did need it because it was a consistent 51 something over and over and over again, and the back end was loose, and then I added that 6 grams and that pushed it over the line, and then it was absolutely sub 50-second car, almost 58 if you really went for it. Now I did also have to turn the voltage up just a little bit. So normally I run my voltage at 80%, and this time I ran it at 86%, just to rinse that little bit of extra pep through the infield, just to get a little bit of a jiggle on through the infield, and that just pushed it over the edge as well. Some cars do need a little bit of extra, but that's absolutely fine. And the car runs beautifully. It doesn't chatter, it doesn't do anything nasty, it's completely straight. It doesn't really want to tip over anymore. Now it's got that extra 6 grams of weight, it doesn't really want to slide its back end anymore. It's really, really progressive and really smooth and really quiet, which means everything's running together. Sometimes when you upgrade these cars, they can chatter, and I've had a few of those in the past, as you've seen with my other builds. They can chatter and they can play up a little bit. This isn't like that. This is fantastic. This really, really, really runs very, very nicely. So thank you very much to Pendle Slot Racing for giving me this car and most of the parts for this build, because I wouldn't have done it if they hadn't have said, do it and carry on with it. I just wouldn't have been a car that I would have wanted to have upgraded, but I'm really glad I have, because it's a really, really nice car to drive now. So hopefully you've enjoyed this sort of content, and if you have, maybe you'll subscribe, and if you could press the little bell button, that would be awesome. So until the next time, thank you very much.